Now welcome to another lightning response video, where yesterday I had a ton of questions left on the video, so let's get to at least a few of them here, and start with this one from Ninja-ish Productions, who asked, "Hey Thor, what do you think about the reports that Rory McCann will be taking over the role of Baylan for Ahsoka Season 2? Apparently McCann was good friends with Ray Stevenson, which is pretty nice." And actually, according to the Hollywood Reporter, which probably isn't making this up or just running with a rumor, but he will be playing Baylan Skoll in Season 2 of the Ahsoka series, replacing, of course, the late Ray Stevenson, who did a fantastic job in Season 1. He was, without question, in my opinion, the highlight of that series, or that first season. I didn't necessarily love the show. I thought it had its problems. I thought the biggest problem was the portrayal of Thrawn, not necessarily Lars Mikkelsen's performance, but just the way he was written. Of course, Thrawn is a beloved legacy character. I am a huge fan of Heir to the Empire. I'm a huge fan of him in the EU in general. He is a fantastic character. He is like the poster child. Him and Mara Jade, in my opinion, are the poster childs of the EU and Legends and where it comes from. And so getting him wrong was a tragic mistake. In my opinion, maybe you loved him in there, I don't know. But anyway, Baylan and Shin were the highlights of the series. They were by far the most interesting aspects of it. So when we heard, of course, that we lost Ray Stevenson, who again did a phenomenal job in there, I was worried about what do you do? Do you write him off the series essentially and kind of dead end what is probably what Season 2 is going to be all about? Which is him going to potentially find the Mortis gods or something to do with Mortis. We saw the statues of the father, the son, and the daughter, and they were pointing to a beacon off in the distance. So it felt like you had to bring him back, or otherwise you're just going to dead end whatever plans you had. And though he wasn't on my radar, though in all honesty, it's not like I was sitting there thinking about who can replace him each and every day. But even though Rory McCann was not on my radar, he is, if you don't know, he's from Game of Thrones, most famously. He played the Hound. But anyway, even though he wasn't on my radar, I think that is a fantastic choice. I think he has that same sort of gravitas and size and just power about him, which is what was really cool about Baylan. He felt very powerful. There was almost this Vader vibe to him where you just could feel the strength emanating off of him. So I think the Hound can accomplish that. I think he can bring that same kind of energy or level of power and intensity, and yet also that serious nature as well, because Baylan was sort of like a philosopher, wasn't he? He was that philosopher that could kick a little ass. So I want to believe that Rory can bring that to the character as well. I think this is a good choice. I am now a little bit more excited about Season 2 than I was before, because again, I didn't know what they were going to do with Baylan. I didn't love Season 1, but hopefully Season 2 with him in it is going to be something good. Alright, let's move on to some Skeleton Crew questions, starting with this one from Piano Scott DeBoer, who asked, "Hey Thor, do you think a lot of why this show has bad numbers is just due to it being on Disney Plus and folks not wanting to pay? It goes back to the second highest rated comment from the last poll, which was something like, Skeleton Crew looks good, but not good enough to purchase an entire Disney Plus subscription for only it. That's the boat I'm in. I'll definitely check it out when I resub to Disney Plus for Andor Season 2, which is a show worth paying a month or two for a Disney Plus subscription for me, but I'm not going to shell out a month subscription for Skeleton Crew alone." And though, as I've said before, I think the biggest contributing factor here is just a lack of faith or trust in Disney and their ability to make good Star Wars, but I do think this is maybe like the number 2 problem. I think you have a lot of people who watched the trailer or seen commercials or just heard about the show or seen whatever it might be about it, and they thought to themselves, that really isn't Star Wars to me. It looks like a kid's show. Not that Star Wars isn't for kids or anything like that, but it looks a little too much like a kid's show, a little too much for children, and I'm not going to pay money to watch that, and only that. It's not like there is anything else coming out on Disney Plus this month or anytime soon until Andor or Daredevil in March, I believe. And when you factor in how many other streaming services there are and how often they put out better content, I mean, look at Netflix. I mean, not everything they put out is great, but they put out so much that, yeah, it's like throwing darts. Eventually you're going to hit a couple bullseyes, and Netflix usually does. I almost always find something on Netflix worth watching, where if I fire up Disney Plus, there's never anything new. I only stay subscribed to it so I can, if I feel like it or need to reference something, I can go back and watch previous Disney Plus shows, or Star Wars shows, I should say, that I don't necessarily already own, because yeah, they're starting to put them out on Blu-ray and 4K and such. But anyway, yeah, I would say that is one of the biggest problems the show faces. It doesn't have that Star Wars appeal to it necessarily. It doesn't stick out as something like I have to watch it because it looks like a really good Star Wars show. It looks like a kid's show. And if you're not subscribed to Disney Plus already, are you really going to pay that much money for just a kid's show? And mind you, I'm not saying it's a bad show. I'm not saying it is technically a kid's show. It's family friendly, yes. But it does go dark. It does have some intrigue. It does have a lot of action and adventure and humor. It's got a little bit of everything and it works really well. But if you're on the outside looking in, you're probably thinking, I'm just not going to pay for that. All right, and kind of going along with that question, we have this one from Just a Contrarian who asked, Hey Thor, you probably mentioned this before, but I wonder whether Skeleton Crew and perhaps other Star Wars shows would be watched more if Disney licensed them out to other streaming services instead of requiring everyone watch them on Disney Plus. For various reasons, many people don't subscribe to it. And though it certainly wouldn't solve all their problems, I don't know that the viewership would be phenomenal if it was suddenly on Netflix, but I do think it would be much better on Netflix, and probably relatively substantially so, right? Netflix has a lot more subscribers for one, and it kind of solves the problem of the previous question or comment, that people don't want to pay just for Skeleton Crew. Whereas a lot of people, they're not canceling their Netflix account because there's seemingly always something on Netflix to watch. And so if it was on there, and I don't know if any of the other ones would be able to boost its ratings necessarily. I think Netflix is far and away the king of streaming. But if it were on there, I certainly think the ratings would be better. I think, again, pretty substantially, but I don't know if it'd be like phenomenal. I don't know if it suddenly is the top rated show or anything quite like that. But certainly being on Disney Plus and the selection of Disney Plus where a lot of people aren't just going to continually pay for it. I see so many comments, and the last one even said it, that, you know, when Andor Season 2 rolls around, yeah, I'll pay for a month or two, and then maybe I'll watch Skeleton Crew, but on its own, I'm not watching Skeleton Crew, and that's because there's just not a whole lot else on Disney Plus for the average person. Okay, moving on, we now have a question from Pedro Zor, who asked, Hey Thor, as always, great video, keep up the good work, thank you. Here to give my 2 cents, and I've seen this before. I think the main issue is the focus on growing the target audience, and by this I mean is that they assume the Star Wars audience is built in and anything they make will have that audience, so the focus must be on gaining new audience outside of that. And this is why they are failing. The additional audience hasn't materialized, and the built-in audience is tired of being antagonized and has left. They need to recognize the mistake and change direction, but they are unwilling to recognize it. And yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. They keep making Star Wars for the phantom new audience instead of making it for the massive audience you already have. Not to mention, what initially made Star Wars the biggest franchise, arguably, in history was Star Wars, right? That first movie took the world by storm because it was Star Wars, because it was good, not because it was something different from Star Wars, obviously, but because they touched on something that was very universal. Lucas and company made something that pretty much everybody could enjoy. And so it's very strange to me that you have to kind of go outside Star Wars to make new fans, when Star Wars itself seems to be very good at making fans. And I'm not saying you can't ever try new and different in order to, maybe branch out and try to entice people to watch Star Wars. But Star Wars itself is the main attraction. It should be. If you are making things that don't feel like Star Wars and that are attracting other people and they enjoy it, but they don't actually like Star Wars, what is the point exactly? I don't know if I'm articulating that as well as I want, but if you make good Star Wars, in theory, people, a wide audience, should enjoy it. That is what worked in the first place. All right, and let's do one more question, and this one comes to us from Joe Volgamore, author, who asked, Hey Thor, do you think the length of the episodes might be hurting this enough to keep it out of the top 10? I wonder where it would rate if each episode was 10 to 15 minutes longer. I'm sure it still wouldn't be top 5 due to circumstances, but maybe top 10. And yeah, I think that does play a pretty significant role. I don't think that is necessarily the reason it didn't crack the top 10, especially given this was a 2-part episode. We had about 90 minutes of watch time. But Nielsen does just base this entirely off the raw watch time per week. It is not taking episode length into account. It is not taking that the show might have previous seasons that people are watching. It's not taking into account that the whole series might be available in comparison to 2 episodes of Skeleton Crew. It is nice getting the Nielsen ratings because we can then get the numbers and then extrapolate from them, but the Nielsen numbers in and of themselves, the top 10, don't necessarily or don't at all tell the full story here. There is much more that you have to try to look at and try to take into account rather than just saying, well, it didn't make the top 10, it's a complete failure, when maybe everything else in the top 10 had more episodes, they were twice as long, and they have 2 or 3 previous seasons. Now, that's not necessarily the case here, but I think you get my point. We can't say not making the top 10 was a failure for Skeleton Crew, but we can take the fact that we know the maximum amount of minutes it could have gotten, and we can compare it to the other Star Wars shows that we have information on and see that, yeah, this did not compete with them. This was worse than all of them. So yeah, the top 10 doesn't say everything, but the fact that it didn't get the numbers and we can compare it to the other Star Wars shows does say quite a bit. Okay, I think that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below. Tell me what you think of any of this news about Baylan being played by Rory McCann. Do you think that's a good casting choice? Or ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do, you start your comment off with "Hey Thor," you ask a question. I try to answer it in a future video. But whatever you choose to do, take to the comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.